our limited resources and allow legal businesses and legal caregivers to operate without the fear of a DEA agent busting in their door. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Virginia.
I'll just strike the requisite number of words.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I hear people talking about the state's rights. If a state said that sexual trafficking is okay, would we honor that and say that we're not going to protect? I would hope not. States in the past have done some things that have not been good in this country. Secondly, we know that many of these marijuana dispensaries are simply fronts for illegal marijuana distribution. The FDA noted in 2006, quote, that there is currently sound evidence that smoked marijuana is harmful, and that, quote, no sound scientific studies supported medical use of marijuana for treatment in the United States, and no animal or human data supported the safety or efficacy of marijuana for general medical use, end of quote. As required by the Controlled Substances Act, the DEA requested a scientific and medical evaluation and scheduling recommendation from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which concluded, and I quote, that marijuana, the stuff that we're saying tonight, anybody, and you saw the 60-minute piece, they come in, they buy, they take. We talk about doctors, the number of doctors that were ripping off people with OxyContin, the number of doctors that were devastating. You can go down to Broward County in Florida and go into some of these pain clinics. There are buses coming down and planes coming down to buy it, and doctors are writing prescriptions. So we're going to hide behind and just say doctors are. The number of doctors that ruin young people on OxyContin, whereby they died. And so to hide behind a doctor says that means it's okay. But Health and Human Services said, quote, marijuana has a high potential for abuse, has no accepted medical use in the United States, and lacks an acceptable level of safety for use under medical supervision. I may be the only one in this body that feels this way. But I'll tell you, I think if this amendment passes and this becomes the law, this will be a gateway to young people. This will literally send a message down to the Mexican cartels. There is going to be a market all over. It will also increase automobile accidents because you'll basically be finding people that are driving while they're high versus driving while they're intoxicated. And so, lastly, I just hope and ask that we defeat this amendment. Why don't you have hearings in the Judiciary Committee? Why don't you have hearings some other place? But at 7:30 or 5, and my friend from Massachusetts was joking about the time, we're 5 after 8. We're doing this, we're changing the law, and I think it will be bad for the country, and urge a no vote.
Gentleman's time has expired. Who seeks time? Seeing none, the questions on the amendment offered by...
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Gentleman to suspend. The questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California. All those in favor signify so by saying aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Gentleman from California.
I request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from California will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Lewis of Georgia. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds provided by this Act may be obligated for the purpose of closing the regional field offices of the Antitrust Division of the Department of Justice.
Gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today to offer an amendment that will prevent the closing of 4 field offices of the Department of Justice Antitrust Division. These offices are located in Atlanta, Dallas, Cleveland, and Philadelphia. The Justice Department announced plans to close these offices with a stated goal of saving $8 million. These closures will not save a dime. In fact, these closures will actually end up costing the government money in lost fine and restitution. Closing the Atlanta office does not even reduce federal overhead. The Atlanta field office is located in a federal courthouse building which will continue to operate. Not only will the antitrust division likely lose those talent lawyers who do not choose to relocate to one of the remaining offices, but it will also move people to some of the most high-cost locations in the country. The southern region is home to the corporate headquarters of over 100 of the Fortune 500 companies. The Atlanta office prosecutes individuals and companies who engage in big rigging, price fixing, and illegal kickback schemes. Shutting down the Atlanta and Dallas sites leave the entire southern region of our nation without any local presence to prosecute and deter antitrust violation and white-collar criminal activity. We cannot and should not underestimate the deterrent effect that the presence of regional law enforcement has on white-collar crime. We cannot afford to leave the Southeast and Southwest without vital law enforcement officials who are tasked with reducing white-collar crime. I ask all of my colleagues to vote for this amendment to prevent the closure of these critical law enforcement offices until a more thorough review of the consequences can be undertaken. This is not a done deal. Congress should and must act. Our amendment won't cost a cent, but it will bring in more than a few dollars. Over the past 11 years, the Atlanta field office alone brought in over $265 million in fines and restitution. Let be clear, that is a 600% rate of return on this investment. What better proof do you need? Mr. Chairman, I ask each and every one of my colleagues again to support the Lewis-Johnson amendment.
Gentleman yields back his time. Who seeks time? Gentlelady from Ohio.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank Congressman Lewis for offering this amendment to the Commerce Justice State Fiscal Year 2013 Appropriations Bill. The amendment is designed to prevent the U.S. Department of Justice from closing and reducing its antitrust division field offices from 7 to only 3. Only 3 in a country of over 300 million people and 50 states. The Department of Justice literally and regrettably wants to or is proposing to close 4 of its antitrust field offices in response to budgetary pressures. And this is partly because the Republican budget fails to provide the administration with the resources it has requested to carry out its basic mission. Under Republican leadership, the legal activities account, which funds the antitrust division, was 2.2% less than the administration requested for the fiscal year 2012, and that resulted in a 5.2% cut compared to fiscal year 2011. When we cut 5.2% out of a particular account that primarily funds salaries and expenses, there are consequences. However, congressional Republicans are not totally to blame. The President's budget says that the Antitrust Division is expecting an increase in caseloads and requested additional funding to administer the increase in caseload, yet the administration wants to close over half the division's offices. What sense does this even make? Also, the Antitrust Division is a key participant on the President's Financial Fraud Enforcement Task Force. How can the division be a helpful participant when it is reducing its footprint across our country? In one of America's poorest cities, with lingering high unemployment, Cleveland, Ohio, that Department of Justice antitrust field office is scheduled to be closed. I'm concerned about the impact it will have, first of all, on the administration of justice in the field of antitrust, but also on the employees, businesses, and consumers that serve us in the greater Ohio area. I'm very concerned for the hardworking employees in the Cleveland field office, one of the most efficient antitrust divisions in the country because its employees are so talented. And Cleveland is a community that still endures high unemployment due to the economic crisis's lingering effects. Why would we want to do this now? From my perspective, the amount of money the Department of Justice expects to save will not actually materialize because costs will increase elsewhere as a result of reduced footprints across the country. The reality is we should be furthering our support for the Antitrust Division, not closing offices or cutting funds. As currently structured, the Antitrust Division is one of the most efficient agencies within the federal establishment. Its base budget was $159 million, yet from 2009 through 2011, the division's efforts resulted in, ready for this, $2 billion in criminal fines and antitrust violations. That's a 7-to-1 return. 7-to-1 return on investment. In addition, over the last 2 fiscal years, the Antitrust Division has been estimated to have saved consumers over $650 million as a result of its criminal enforcement efforts. Furthermore, the Antitrust Division successfully resolved 97% of its criminal cases in fiscal year 2011. Without question, the Antitrust Division more than pays for itself, 7 times over. It has an outstanding track record. We should leave its current structure alone. In fact, we should seek to strengthen it and get a greater return to the taxpayers for every dollar invested. No matter what happens here today or tomorrow, I'll continue to work with the other body to protect the Antitrust Division's presence across this country and work to ensure that the employees in communities like Cleveland and the other communities are treated fairly. Because in the final analysis, the American people need robust antitrust division meting out of justice. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I support the Lewis Amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back her time. Who seeks time? Gentleman from Georgia. The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of this amendment, which will ensure that the Department of Justice has the resources it needs to fight white-collar crime. The Department is preparing to close Antitrust Division regional offices in Atlanta, Cleveland, Dallas, and Philadelphia. This amendment will prevent the closure of these field offices during fiscal year 2013. As a member of the Judiciary Subcommittee on Intellectual Property, Competition, and the Internet, I am concerned about the impact of these closures. This action will seriously undermine the division's ability to enforce antitrust laws by limiting the number of boots on the ground, particularly in the Southeast and the Southwest. Closing these offices is very short-sighted. It puts nearly 100 jobs at risk in Atlanta and saves only $500,000 in fiscal year 2013. The proposal could end up costing money by transferring employees to regional offices with higher costs of living and higher salaries, like New York and San Francisco. Further, the proposal will weaken the Antitrust Division as experienced attorneys who choose not to transfer leave for other opportunities. Antitrust law is a highly specialized field of law, and the institutional knowledge of an experienced attorney is invaluable. The Atlanta office ranks #1 in terms of the most trial wins of any of the 8 criminal offices. In fiscal year 2008, the Atlanta office ranked first among all 8 criminal offices in the amount of restitution obtained for victims. For that fiscal year, the Atlanta office accounted for 71.2% of all restitution imposed by the division. As this nation recovers from a recession largely caused by white-collar misdoing, I implore this House to consider the message that closure of these offices will send to the public. Those considering whether to commit white-collar crime need to know that there is strict federal enforcement. Closing these field offices sends the wrong message to criminals and the public at exactly the wrong time. This Congress has been consumed with debating the proper role and scope of government. During that debate, we have all agreed that the minimum role of government is to ensure an equal playing field that allows opportunity for all and ensures that all wrongdoers will be prosecuted, no matter if they are engaged in petty criminal offenses or white-collar crimes. The Antitrust Division, which promotes and protects competition in the marketplace, is essential to good governance and fairness. Surely, Tea Partiers and progressives, ALEC members and union leaders can all agree that government must ensure a fair and competitive marketplace that allows for innovation. The closure of these 4 field offices will have the effect of significantly eroding the division's criminal enforcement program, leaving U.S. consumers and businesses in at least 19 states, the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, unprotected against white-collar crooks like Bernie Madoff, who seek to rig bids, inflate prices, and otherwise defraud consumers and businesses. I urge a yes vote on this amendment, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Georgia seek recognition?
Move to strike the last
Gentleman is
word.
recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today in support of the Lewis-Johnson amendment. This amendment ensures that none of the funding provided in the bill will be used to facilitate the closure of the Department of Justice Antitrust Division regional offices in Atlanta, Cleveland, Dallas, and Philadelphia. Mr. Chairman, from our discussions in the full committee markup of this bill, I understand that Mr. Wolf, the distinguished chairman of the subcommittee, believes that this matter can be worked out and that justices may perhaps are willing to move on this. But I'm deeply concerned that this action will seriously undermine the division's ability to enforce antitrust laws by limiting the number of boots on the ground, particularly in the Southeast and the Southwest. Accepting that this is a done deal and there's no room for negotiation by Congress will severely weaken our ability to enforce the antitrust laws. Furthermore, given the already heavy workload of the Washington, D.C., San Francisco, New York, and Chicago field offices, the Antitrust Division will not have sufficient human resources to investigate and prosecute many regional and local conspiracies in the areas of responsibility that those 4 offices have, the ones that are slated to be closed. I want to ensure that the Antitrust Division can continue to protect taxpayers and preserve integrity of our free market system. The regional offices in Atlanta, Cleveland, Dallas, and Philadelphia help facilitate these efforts, and they should remain open. Closing these offices, I believe, is penny-wise and pound-foolish. It puts nearly 100 jobs at risk, and it poses only a $500,000 savings in fiscal year 13. In fact, the proposal could end up costing money because it will transfer employees to regional offices with higher costs of living and higher salaries, like New York and San Francisco. It's extremely important that we don't close these offices until a thorough review of the Antitrust Division is completed. When deciding to recommend these closures, the Department of Justice did not consider other, more cost-effective options. Furthermore, if offices must be eliminated, all of the closures should be based on merit and productivity rather than on politics. Let me speak for a moment on the Atlanta office, which does better in terms of overall performance and productivity than, say, for instance, some of the other offices which are slated to remain open. the Atlanta office obtained over $265 million in fines and restitution between FY 2000 and 2011. With an annual operating cost of $4 million, the criminal fines and restitutions recovered by the office represent a return rate of 600%. Indeed, closing these offices is penny-wise and pound-foolish, and I urge the adoption of the amendment for the good of our free market system and our capitalist economy. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Gentleman from Virginia.
I rise in opposition to the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I want to thank the gentleman and the gentlelady for raising this issue and standing up. This was not done by our committee. This was done by the Justice Department, by the administration. But what we will do is next week we will ask the 3 or 4 who spoke that we bring the Justice Department. We'll get them to come up here whereby they can sit down with all of you together and your staffs to explain why and to see if they can justify this. But I just want to be clear, this was not done at the committee's request. This was the Justice Department. Yes.
I appreciate the gentleman yielding, and I appreciate those comments. And I think it was clear that this was an action by the department, and it was not action taken by the committee. However, several of us in the committee have grave concerns about it, and we appreciate the chairman's agreement and his willingness to discuss it with the Justice Department and see if we can't get this situation corrected.
Okay, thank you. With that,
yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Georgia. Those in favor of adopting the amendment signify so by saying aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair. The noes have it. Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Florida will be postponed. Gentleman from Utah.
I have an amendment at the desk, Mr. Chairman.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
36.
In the congressional record offered by Mr. Chaffetz of Utah.
Gentleman from Utah is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of short months ago, the Department of Justice, in support of the Americans with Disability Act, added a new provision. This provision said that in order to be in compliance with the ADA regulations, businesses must now allow service horses into their businesses. And you did hear right. They're talking about service horses to be in compliance with the ADA regulation. And I'm here to stand and say we need to say nay to that type of effort. Pardon the pun, it's kind of hard to get through this without smiling about it. But this is the kind of regulation that has untold number of consequences on small businesses. And while I recognize the imperative and the need that some unfortunate Americans go through in having to deal with things, there comes a point where we have to stand up and say, wait a sec. Do we really need to allow service horses on airplanes, into hotels, into restaurants, just to accommodate a particular person? And this amendment would prohibit funding from the implementation of yet another costly federal regulation. The regulation would require businesses and restaurants to admit service horses in the same way they admit service dogs into their areas of operation. I wish I didn't have to bring up this amendment, but since the administration has now put this into a rule, we're going to have to introduce this amendment. Despite the difficulty, and some would say the impossibility, of housebreaking a horse, the Obama Justice Department has ruled that service horses, miniature horses used to accompany people with disabilities, are no different than guide dogs under the Americans with Disabilities Act. As a result, shops, restaurants, hotels, even airlines can now be sued if they do not accommodate horses in their place of business. That regulation joins a long list of rules with which small businesses must comply. In fact, the New York Times recently reported on a particular insidious scheme in which lawyers recruit disabled people, pay them a fee, and use them to file lawsuits against businesses that fail to comply with any one of the hundreds of ADA rules. For small businesses, the cost of compliance with that law that designates, for instance, 95 different standards for bathrooms alone is just the beginning. They must also pay attorney's fees to the litigants in such case, even though many businesses say they would have complied without a lawsuit. Some 1.65 million lawsuits are filed each year over enforcement of federal regulations, according to Berkeley law professor Sean Farring, author of The Litigation State. Estimates by the Competitive Enterprise Institute suggest that regulation cost the economy some $1.75 trillion in 2008 alone. That's a massive drag on the U.S. economy. With the average of 9 new rules appearing in the Federal Registry every day, small businesses with few resources struggle to keep up with the ever-changing regulatory environment. Some 65% of the nation's net new jobs are created by small businesses, according to the Small Business Administration. Overregulation has a direct effect on their ability to create jobs and compete in the marketplace. If a person wishes to bring a horse into an establishment, then the request should be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, not through some new federal mandate. Ironically, even the Miniature Horse Association, and I'm sure all good Americans subscribe to the magazine put out by the American Miniature Horse Association, but their president, Harry Elder, has looked at this. He does not condone the use of animals as the use of these horses as a replacement for guide dogs. In fact, he has said, quote, "The American miniature horse can readily be trained to lead or driven, but in most cases it would not make a suitable replacement for an animal such as a guide dog." So there is an association that deals with these miniature horses. Even that association and their president is saying this is not a wise move. If the body feels that this is an imperative thing to do, I suggest a member of Congress be brave enough to introduce such a piece of legislation, that it be properly vetted by having a hearing about this, and we can move through the legislative process. But since the administration has introduced this regulation, this is just suggesting that we should not spend money against this and let this be a little bit more vetted. It would help American businesses. Unfortunately, there are already lawsuits flying. I would encourage members on both sides of the aisle to please vote for this amendment. And I'll yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from from Pennsylvania.
I rise to strike the last word. I had an
Gentleman's
opportunity
recognized
to
for 5 minutes.
had an opportunity to visit while I was in Connecticut with Chairman Larson with a brave young soldier who lost his eyesight in Iraq. And there was a situation where his ability to function required an animal to help guide him so that he could go about his normal functions of daily life. What the gentleman who made this amendment neglected to share with the House is that it has been the law that under the ADA guidelines you could have any animal, monkey, horse, so forth and so on, that could be of use to someone who is disabled. And what the administration has done with this new regulation is limit this to only 2 types of animals. One is a guide dog, as we would normally know it, and the other are miniature horses that meet certain requirements, including being housebroken and so forth and so on. The reason why people who are disabled in some cases find this a more useful process or animal to use is that they live 3 times longer than a dog does, and they have perfect vision. But I see that there's been some, I guess, laughter or as if this is comical. But the fact of the matter is, when I met with this young soldier and his wife and their 2 kids, he talked about how it just made him feel whole, that he could go get the newspaper from out in front of the house, that he could go to the store. So the idea that this is some new policy of the Obama administration is false, number one. Number 2, it's restricting an overly broad set of allowances in this regard. And it restricts it to only 2 types of animals, both of which can be used by people who are disabled. So I would hope that the House, even those in the majority, who seem to find, for some reason, challenges in this bill in particular with the provisions that they want to go after that allow disabled people to use pools. And we heard on yesterday how every group in the Veterans Associations around our country opposed this effort yesterday on the pool access. And now we're here talking about whether or not people who've lost their sight or are disabled can have a guide animal. So I oppose the amendment. I hope the House rejects it. I'd be glad to yield.
Thank you. I do want to indicate that I believe it was in March that the Department of Justice Title III regulations issued a new ruling. So we may disagree on what to do with this, but I do want to clarify for the record that this is
reclaiming my time, you are aware, I assume, that this ruling was a restriction from the much broader ruling that allowed any type of animal, including monkeys, and I could go into the different other animals if you like.
If the gentleman will yield,
I'd be glad to yield.
I would disagree with that assessment. This is a new regulation and has led to lawsuits that have already started to happen. One news report, a lawsuit in California.
Well, let me reclaim my time. This just so we can clarify this one matter of fact here, okay? In that the regulation prior to this adjustment allowed for service animals of any type, including a dog, horse, monkey, bird, rat, trained to assist and alert. Okay, that's number one. So this is a move by the Obama administration to restrict it to two types of animals. So I just want the House to be able to operate off of actual information because this is an effort to both help those who are disabled and also to avoid unnecessary circumstances in which regulations are too broad.
If the gentleman yield, I'd be happy to work with you. Happy to work with you on this. I do disagree with that assessment and that reading of it.
No, this is. Let me reclaim my time. This is not an assessment. This is a fact. And so this was the regulation. The new regulation retreats and constrains the regulation to two animals versus a multiplicity of animals.
If the gentleman will yield.
I'd be glad to yield.
I simply disagree with that assessment. We'll have to agree to disagree and look forward to working with you.
Let me reclaim my time because we're not talking about an assessment. I want the House to be aware that this is not the appropriate place to deal with this matter. But if we insist on it, I would hope that we would err on the side of that young, brave soldier who risked his life on behalf of our country, and that he should have whatever assistance that can be provided.
The time of the gentleman's expired. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Utah. Those in favor signify so by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment's adopted. Gentleman from New Jersey.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the amendment. Did the gentleman submit a copy of his amendment to the desk?
I have. Mr. Chairman, I am sending another copy to the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Holt of New Jersey. At the end of the bill, before the short title, insert the following section. None of the funds made available by this act may be used by the Department of Justice in contravention of any of the following. 1. The 5th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution of the United States. 2. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 42 U.S.C. 2000D.
Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent that this be considered
Without
as read.
objection, so ordered. Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Mr. Chairman, the purpose of this amendment is simple. to prohibit any federal funds from flowing to law enforcement organizations that engage in any form of racial, ethnic, or religious profiling. It's been a matter of concern for decades among minority communities when policing organizations engage in profiling, but recent events have brought the problem into sharp focus. Starting last August, the Associated Press published a series of disturbing stories about the systematic racial, ethnic, and religious profiling conducted by the New York City Police Department against Muslim and Arab Americans in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and Louisiana. In September of last year, I asked the Department of Justice to investigate what we now know was a pattern of surveillance and infiltration by the New York Police Department against innocent American Muslims in the absence of a valid investigative reason. These Muslim communities were mapped, infiltrated, and surveilled simply because they were Muslim. Profiling is wrong. Profiling on the basis of race, ethnicity, and religion is a violation of core constitutional principles. Profiling is also wrong because it is not good policing. Profiling is an unthinking, lazy, unprofessional approach to police work and intelligence work, and it only raises the risk that the real plot will slip through the cracks. Indeed, profiling is counterproductive. The sloppiness of the NYPD surveillance effort was such that several non-Muslim establishments were labeled as being owned by Muslims. And contrary to the blanket assertions by some that the tactics have kept New York City safe, the NYPD failed to uncover two actual plots against New York City, those perpetrated by Faisal Shahad and Najibullah Azazi. In Shahad's case, the FBI was surveilling both the mosque he attended and the Muslim Student Association of his accomplice. In Zazi's case, the NYPD actually took actions that let Zazi be tipped off about the FBI's investigation. The NYPD's surreptitious, uncoordinated, and unprofessional approach to counterterrorism prevention within the American Muslim community shows that they have learned nothing from the lessons elucidated from the 9/11 Commission's report. Now, let me be clear. This amendment is not aimed solely at one particular law enforcement organization. Over the decades, law enforcement agencies across the country have profiled against African Americans, Hispanics, and other minorities. Indeed, the Department of Justice has specific guidance prohibiting this practice because it has become widespread, and it has conducted litigation against police departments for using race or ethnicity to target citizens for arrest in California, Pennsylvania, Illinois, and other states. My amendment would ensure that no federal funds are flowing to any law enforcement entity that the Department has identified as engaging in racial, ethnic, and religious profiling. I ask consent to include with my remarks several letters from important organizations that support this
Gentleman's request
amendment.
to be covered in general leave.
I thank the Chair. Racial, ethnic, and religious profiling by police is not something taxpayer dollars should be spent for. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from New York.
Senator, move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I must say that I strongly oppose this amendment, and I disagree with virtually every word spoken on the floor tonight by the gentleman from New Jersey. Let's understand one thing. The NYPD is the most effective counter-terrorism unit in the country. There are 1,000 police working day in and day out. As a result of that, almost 13 or 14 attempts, terrorist attempts, Islamist terrorist attempts to attack New York have been stopped. Now, let's get something straight. The President's Homeland Security Advisor, John Brennan, recently visited with the NYPD. During that meeting, or following that meeting, Mr. Brennan, President Obama's Homeland Security Advisor, stated, quote, "I have full confidence that the NYPD is doing things consistent with the law, and it's something that, again, has been responsible for keeping this city safe over the past decade." Mr. Brennan, the President's Homeland Security Advisor, went on to say, if we are going to have the ability to identify and stop terrorist operatives and terrorist attacks here on our shores, the national government cannot do it alone. The NYPD is a model of how a community can come together. He closed by saying to the NYPD, you have had a very difficult job. I think you have done it very well. The success is in the record in terms of keeping this city safe. In addition to that, FBI Director Mueller has stood by the NYPD, said that they are in full compliance with the law. CIA Director Petraeus, there's an IG inspection done that the NYPD's relationship with the CIA was in full compliance with the law. These slanderous attacks by the Associated Press and the New York Times cannot point out one instance of the law being violated or one provision of the Constitution being violated. We should be here tonight giving the NYPD a medal. We sit here 10.5 years after September 11th, and the most effective law enforcement counterterrorism unit in the country is being attacked. We are attempting to cite the Constitution and provisions of law as somehow an attack on the NYPD when no one complies with these more than the NYPD. And again, we go through whether it's Director Petraeus, whether it's Director Mueller, or whether it's the President of the United States, his own Homeland Security Advisor, have said this. Now, I work closely with the NYPD. Those in New York, whether it's Mayor Bloomberg, whether it's City Council President Christine Quinn, she's a Democrat, he's an independent, both stand by the NYPD because of what they had done. And to think that the most effective organization is being attacked by the Associated Press, the New York Times, and those attacks are being joined here on the floor of the Congress of the United States without one fact to back them up. There's no spying. All this is good police work. The reality is we're not going to sit back like we did on September 11th and allow the enemy to come. If we know that an attack is coming, if we're told, for instance, that operatives are coming from a particular country, and there's a community in New York City where those people live, then obviously you go, you do conduct open surveillance. No one's talking about any violations of the Constitution. I remember years ago when the Justice Department was going after the Mafia. They went to the Italian-American communities. When they were going after the Westies, they went to the Irish-American communities. When you're looking for the Russian mob, you go to the communities in Coney Island and Brighton Beach. That's where the enemy comes from. 99% of the people are law-abiding. But if you're looking for the person who is going to that community to carry out a crime, you look in that community. If you're looking for an Islamic terrorist, you don't go to Ben's Kosher Deli. When they were looking for the Italian mob, they didn't go to an Irish bar. They went to the Italian social clubs. This is solid law enforcement. That's not profiling. That's an abuse of the term profiling to even suggest that. So I cannot be more emphatic or stronger in my denunciation of this amendment, calling for its defeat, and urging people to stand by the NYPD, which has kept New York safe for 10.5 years. I went to too many funerals. I attended too many wakes. I lost too many constituents. I'm not going to allow it to happen so long as I'm in this Congress. I oppose this amendment.
Gentleman's time has expired. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey.
As to strike the last word.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 5 minutes.
This is a well-intentioned issue in the sense that all this amendment says is that none of the funds in this bill should be used to violate the Constitution of the United States, the 5th and the 14th Amendment. So I'm sure there'll be those who want to adhere to it. But this is not the appropriate place to be dealing with this issue. This is an appropriations bill. We've had dozens of riders, one after another, where people are trying to get at other issues. Now, there's no instance, no matter what the purpose under which we should be condemning law enforcement when they are carrying out appropriate responsibilities. And they should be given the benefit of the doubt. In the same instance, we have a responsibility to uphold the Constitution. The Constitution is clear in its delineation that you can't discriminate, and we shouldn't. It's not good law enforcement practices, no matter who you're looking for, to act in ways in which you close your eyes to other possibilities. If you're looking for terrorists, they don't come in any particular subset or group. And I know that wise law enforcement is aware of this, and that they look at across the board at what the vulnerabilities may be. I want to thank the gentleman from New Jersey for his steadfastness in trying to protect against religious bigotry or ethnic discrimination or unintentional stepping across the line, however one might want to look at this. But again, this is a bill in which we're trying to deal with the appropriation of federal dollars for needed law enforcement activity, and I would hope that I'd be glad to yield.
This is completely consistent with an appropriations bill for the Department of Justice. You know, just as we have spent decades getting away from the practice of harassing people for driving while black, we've got to get away from the practice of harassing people for shopping while Muslim.
Reclaiming my time, the point here is that every dollar that we appropriate to the Department of Justice, we operate under the belief that they're carrying out their constitutional responsibility. So a limitation that says that they have to operate within the Constitution, at best, is somewhat redundant.
If the gentleman would yield again. You know, a reference was made to the Deputy National Security Advisor of President Obama, Mr. Brennan. What Mr. Brennan actually said was that for the NYPD to be effective, they need the cooperation of the Muslim community. And in fact, if you talk with the Muslim community, they are not only outraged by this behavior, they are intimidated by it. They see it as profiling. And, you know, my colleague from New York or my colleague from Pennsylvania can say, well, of course everybody's operating under the law. The fact is...
Reclaiming my time. I didn't say that.
There have been many litigations.
Reclaiming my time.
Carried forward by the Department of Justice.
I understand that from the press reports one could consider this profiling. All I'm suggesting to you is that this is not the appropriate vehicle for us to deal with it. Profiling would be improper, and I would hope that the Justice Department, and I believe that they've articulated that their position is not to profile. I'd be glad to yield.
I would hope that the gentleman would find a place for this instruction to the Department of Justice to do and to make sure that the recipients of their grants do what they are indeed supposed to do. We're talking about money spent. We should make sure that the taxpayer money is spent for good policing.
Well, I thank the gentleman, and as I indicated, I commend you for raising this issue. I know it's unpopular in some areas. I'm just suggesting that on an appropriations bill, a rider like this, I don't believe, dictating to the department that they should comply with the Constitution is similar to some other amendments we've seen today. I believe the department has an ongoing, everyday responsibility to comply with the Constitution. I yield back my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Virginia.
Strike the requisite number of words.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I share the comment that Mr. Fattah made and my friend from New York, Mr. King. At every hearing we raise this issue with Director Mueller. Director Mueller may be the best, not one of the best director that we've ever had at the FBI. And I think Director Mueller has stood with the New York NYPD, had an opportunity to speak and say something negative, did not. And so I think, and my good friend, and he is my friend, I think we throw words around there, but I like Rush Holt, and he knows how I feel about him. But this is not a good amendment, and it almost makes the FBI look like they're doing something wrong, or the NYPD like they're doing something wrong. To have a colloquy on the floor, but to have an amendment that looks like it's a direct kind of attack on after. And I looked at the original amendment, and you had to kind of change it in order to be in order. Secondly, I think Ray Kelly is one of the finest police chiefs we've ever had in the country. And if you were an NYPD policeman, you would see this and think. And thirdly, to validate what Mr. King said, and I read here, President Barack Obama's top counterterrorism advisor praised the New York Police Department's work Friday, saying the agency has struck an appropriate balance between keeping people safe and protecting their rights. And we have to remember Major Hassan was responsible for the death of 13 people, and there were targets and signs that nobody wanted to kind of identify. And as Mr. King said, you know, there were about 180 people from my congressional district that died in the attack in the Pentagon. And Brennan goes on to say, quote, "It is not a trade-off between our security and our freedoms and our rights as citizens," end of quote. John Brennan said Friday in an appearance at NYPD headquarters. Quote, "I believe that the balance that we strike has been an appropriate one. We want to make sure that we're able to optimize our security. At the same time, we optimize those freedoms we hold and cherish so deeply." Brennan's comments represent a White House stamp of approval of the NYPD's tactics. For months, the Obama administration has sidestepped the question about the NYPD surveillance program while insisting on the importance of building partnerships with American Muslims. And then it goes on to say, city officials said the police department has done nothing illegal and argue that the NPD would have endangered the city, it is charged with protecting if it did not take such preventive measures. Officers cannot wait to open an investigation until a crime is committed, they argue. Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly has said it is a mischaracterization to describe the department's tactics as spying. And then I'll close with this. In a speech to the police department's officials and representative from private security firms, Brennan then went on to said the NYPD's counterterrorism work was essential to the safety of the nation's citizens. So, I agree with Mr. King and I agree with Mr. Fattah. Certainly, absolutely.
The Deputy National Security Advisor, it's worth pointing out that a couple of days later, the White House felt it necessary to back away from his comments, to say John, in his remarks, wasn't referring to the NYPD surveillance. Of course he was, but they had to say he wasn't because he had misspoken. Rather, he was stating that everyone in the counterterrorism and law enforcement community must make sure that we are doing things consistent with the law. In other words, Mr. Brennan he was out of bounds, and the White House had to walk that back. So I wouldn't, if I were you, choose his endorsement of these NYPD activities as the best argument against my amendment.
Well, reclaiming my time, I do take Mr. Brennan at his word. I think Mr. Brennan is actually a constituent. This is my congressional district. He has a pretty distinguished career, having been our station chief in Saudi Arabia and head of the Counterterrorism Center, and probably has forgotten more about terrorism than any member here in the Congress, but for perhaps
if the chairman would yield for a second.
And Mr. Ruppersberger. But secondly, Director Mueller, who I maintain is one of the best directors. Director Mueller is the honest, decent, ethical guy who cares deeply with regard to civil rights. And Mr. Serrano is not here, but God bless Mr. Serrano. At every hearing, Mr. Serrano always bears in to make sure that the FBI is doing things appropriately, and I believe they are, and he validated what the NYPD did. I think it's just not a good idea to be attacking our law enforcement and saying this when they're actually doing a good job. So I stand with Mr. Fattah and I stand with Mr. King. And I'll yield if you want me to.
No, the time of the gentleman from Virginia.
I asked the gentleman to have 2 more minutes so he can say. I don't want to.
Is there objection? Seeing none, gentlemen.
I thank the chairman for yielding. I don't think it's inconsistent.
Without objection, the gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 2 minutes.
It is not inconsistent for us to want to have support for law enforcement and also that the Constitution be followed. I want to again say that I think that if you want, we have access to them. If you want law enforcement to come in and brief you on these tactics and talk this thing through, that's fine. But I don't believe that we should take a position of all the angels on one side, and to the contrary, there's no police department that's perfect. But the point here is that the effort is one, I believe, to comply with the constitutional restrictions, that you do not operate without a due process and a probable cause. And let's see if we can find a way, other than this amendment, to see if we can get to the heart of this.
Okay, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey. Those in favor signify so by saying aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Noes have it. The amendment is
I ask the chair for a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from New Jersey will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Minnesota seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment at the desk.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 7, printed in the Congressional Record, offered by Mr. Kravac of Minnesota.
Gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to offer an amendment that would prohibit any more funding going to a duplicative program. I'd like to think that everyone in this room is well aware that we are $15.7 trillion in debt. Our spending is out of control. We are simply spending money we don't have and massively indebting future generations of Americans. The GAO reports that duplicative U.S. government programs cost billions of dollars. 13 agencies fund 209 different science, technology, engineering, and math education programs. 173 of those programs overlap with at least one other program. We have to be responsible for how the government spends Americans' hard-earned tax dollars. We cannot afford to borrow money to fund duplicative programs that are already under the purview of established agencies and protocols. The Climate Change Education Program at the National Science Foundation duplicates education programs already in place. Currently, worthy research proposals subject to rigorous peer-reviewed processes. The Climate Change Education Program sets aside money for a specific purpose, which is already covered in interagency education programs. This is just more big government and a waste of taxpayer dollars. Last year, the Climate Change Education Program funded partnerships among K-12 education, related nonprofit organizations, and relevant education and/or climate-related policymakers. This year, however, now the program is morphed into a sustainable research network to create new interdisciplinary learning experiences for graduate and undergraduate students, as well as literacy programs. In the military, we call this mission creep. National Science Foundation funds basic research and serves as an engine of our innovation economy. However you feel about global warming, that is not the debate here today, though I look forward to engaging that in the future. This amendment addresses a duplicative program that is not necessary and costing the taxpayers money we simply don't have. We need to prioritize innovation and research in NSF and eliminate duplicative education programs that do nothing to improve the economic outlook of our future. We need to get back to the basics. I ask all of my colleagues to join me in this common sense amendment in ending a duplicative program that is wasting taxpayer dollars and further indebting future generations. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Who seeks time? Gentleman from Pennsylvania.
I rise to strike the requisite number of awards.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I oppose this amendment. Climate change is a big issue in the world that we live in. It affects our economy, our ability to move goods. We've had the most severe weather season we've had in history over the last 12 months, the most severe incidents. That is $1 billion+ in costs. Our ability to understand the weather and the climate and its impact on business and industry, on agriculture, is critically important. I think that the National Science Foundation, which is an entirely merit-based system of scientific awards in which they fund less than 1 out of every 5 meritorious pieces of research proposals. There's absolutely no politics. The National Science Board, which is confirmed by the Senate, reviews these proposals. They make selections. The idea that we don't want to know more or learn more, I think is interesting. I would hope that the House would reject that and that what we would do is seek knowledge as a way to retain our global leadership as the leading nation in the world. I would gift back the remainder of my time.
The gentleman yields back his time.
Mr. Chairman.
Who seeks time? Gentleman from Alaska.
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
And I recognize the gentleman from Minnesota.
The gentleman from Alaska needs to remain on his feet.
Mr. Speaker, in regarding duplicative programs, again, this is about duplicative programs. The National Science Foundation already funds STEM education and even climate change education programs in Education and Human Resources Directorate for worthy peer-reviewed proposals. Total U.S. spending for the U.S. Global Change Research Program, 13 agencies, is more than $2.5 billion, primarily at NASA, NOAA, and NSF. NSF spending for the U.S. Global Change Research Program is over $333 million. NSF spending for education is $1.2 billion a year. Climate change education can be addressed through NSF climate research activities and NSF education activities. There is no need to fund additional special climate change education programs. This newer program under the Obama administration is currently funded at $10 million a year, $5.5 million from Education Directorate and $4.5 million from several research directorates as identified. Again, this is a duplicative program and a waste of the taxpayer dollars. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back. I yield to the gentleman from Alaska.
I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Minnesota. Those in favor signify so by saying aye.